Hey guys, what's up? It's Laurence again from J3D Tutorials, and today we're going to be doing something new. So up until now we've created a basic front-end application in our previous videos, which don't really do anything, but it basically just shows a message on the screen. So today what we're going to be doing differently is we're going to be creating an application that actually does something. We'll have a text box to input some text, we'll have a button to submit the text, and we'll have another little area in the screen where it will basically just print what we type to the screen. So this is going to introduce a few new concepts for us. But yeah, be sure to follow closely and everything should be quite easy and straightforward. So let's get started. So as before, we're going to create a new project with an empty activity. And we're going to call this, let's say, simple input. And don't worry about the package name, Java, and the same settings as always. We're going to give it a second while the project builds. And the same as before, we're going to be working with the same two files, the main activity.java file, which is here, and the activity main.xml layout file, which you'll find in the res layout. Okay, let's get that out of the way. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is create the front end of the application. We're basically just going to create the elements that will be on the screen, and then after that we'll use the main activity file and we'll define what each element does. Okay, so we're not going to be needing this little text view element, so we can delete that. What we are going to be needing is a few layouts. So we're going to use linear layouts to order our elements on the screen, and we'll see how that works in a second. Obviously, a linear layout, a horizontal one, means that any two elements placed in the linear layout will be placed next to each other horizontally. And for a vertical linear layout, any elements that we place in there will be one underneath the other. So basically, our application is going to want two rows, and in the one row, we'll have a text box on the left and a button on the right. So, in our constraint layout, the first thing we're going to create is a vertical layout, and then inside of that, we're going to place a horizontal layout. Okay, so next thing we want to do is a input for where we can type a message and then a button to submit that message. So we're going to create a plain text input. We're going to put that inside the horizontal layout, because remember we want a button next to it. And then we're going to take a button, which we're going to use to submit, and we'll place that just after that input. There we go. We can see we've got an input to input a name, but it doesn't have to be a name. It could be any text, and a button to submit. The next element we're going to use is we're going to want a text view where it will basically just print to the screen what we just told it. So let's add a text view, but remember we're not going to put it in the horizontal layout. This one we're going to put in the vertical layout below the horizontal one. So we're going to place it here like that. And there we go. There's our text view. Now we can't see it because there's no text in it at the moment. So let's just add some text so we can see what it says. Some text here. Okay, and obviously it's now not showing properly. So let's move it above this horizontal layout. And there we go. Okay, so we've got our output text over here, a little input box where we can type a message, and a button. So basically what we're going to want this to do is we'll type something in here, push the submit button, and it will then show that text over here. Really plain and simple. Obviously a stupid app doesn't do anything useful, but it's important for learning a few concepts. So first thing that you may want to do is you'll notice that things are a little bit cramped up top here. So let's add a bottom margin to this so it just adds a bit of space between these elements over here. So we're going to select the top one, and we'll go down to the attributes, which is over here, all attributes, and we're going to scroll down until we find the bottom margin one. So here we've got layout margin. You can expand that, and margin bottom. We can add a value, any value you like. It can be in different units. We can do it in pixels or dp. So I'm just going to go 25 dp, for example, and there you see things are spaced nicely. Okay. Next thing that's important for all of your apps that you'll be doing is you need to assign a unique ID to each element. So we need an ID for this text view, we need an ID for this input text, and we need an ID for the button. So let's just make the ID for this one. You can change the ID attribute over here. So we'll make the ID for this top text. We'll call it text display. For the input text, we'll call it, let's call it text input. And for the button, we can call it BTN, short for button submit. Okay. The next thing you can also change is the placeholder value. So instead of this prompting you for a name, which is the text here, you can make it say type something here. Great. And on the button, we can also change that to say submit. Great. Now each of our elements has an ID and its own unique text. Now let's look at how we go to the main activity file and actually assign what these elements will be doing. Okay, now we're in the main activity file, and you'll notice that we've got the main activity class, and then in it we've got an OnCreate method. Don't worry about what these mean, but for now we'll be working entirely on the OnCreate method. That basically means that as soon as you launch the activity or the app, it will call this method and it will do what we tell it to do. So obviously we'll need a few variables which we can assign to each of our elements. So we've got a button. Just go Alt-Enter to add that class. We've got a button. We can call it button submit, the same as we did earlier. We've got a text view. We can call it txt display. And we've got an edit text. We can call that txt input, just the same as before. So these three are basically just placeholders. And we're going to be assigning values to these. We're going to be you can think of it as linking it to the layout in a second. So how do we do that? Okay, well, we've got our button submit variable. Let's start with that one. And in the layout file, you've got a button, and its ID is also button submit. So to link it, you're going to say button submit is equal to, so we're now assigning it a value, find view by ID, which basically means that Android will go onto the layout and it will find the element with whichever ID we give it. The IDs will always start with r.id, and then we'll put in the ID for the element, and it was button submit. There we go. Okay, we may get an error because it will realize that this is going to return a button element, and it's not going to return any kind of elements. So what we'll actually do here is cast it to a button. So therefore, we're basically telling Android that it will expect to find a button. The same for the other two elements. So we're going to go txt display is equal to text view, because remember we're going text view. Sorry, that was a mistake. Don't need that. We're going to give it a text view and find view by ID, r.id, and remember what we called it. We called it text display. And the same for the text input. Edit text, find view by ID, r.id.txt input. And there we have it. We have now assigned the values to all of our elements over here, and now we can actually define what each of them do. Okay, so the txt display and the txt input, we're not really going to work directly with them, but instead what we're going to do is we're going to choose what button submit does when we click it. So what we're going to do is we're going to define the onClick method of button submit. So basically that means we're basically going to define how it will behave when we click it. So we're going to go button submit dot set onClick listener, and then we're going to go new view.onClick listener. You just press tab and it will automatically create all of this stuff for you. And then here we go. Here we have the onClick method of the button submit. So that's basically saying when we click it, it must do this, whatever is in this block here. So we're going to say we want the txt display dot set text, which basically means we're going to set the text of our display block to be txt input dot get text. So that's really straightforward. We're going to get the text from the input, and we're going to set the text to the display block. Simple as that, guys. So now let's run it on our virtual Android device and see what happens. And there we go. So we're going to run it on our virtual device. Click OK, wait for it to install. And there it is. There's our application. We've got our output box and our input and our submit button. So let's type something over here and see if it does what we want it to. We can say, hey there, for example, and we'll go submit. And there we go, our text changed. Isn't that great? So now let's add a little bonus functionality. So say when we click the submit button, we wanted to make a little pop-up at the bottom. You know how Android makes those little messages. It's called a toast. So what we're going to do is on our onClick method, we're going to add another line, and we can say, so it's going to set the text, and then it's going to do this. It's going to go toast dot make text, which basically means it's just going to make a little text message. And we need to say where we want it to show the message. So it will be in the main activity. That's called the context. So it'll always be in the main activity. Main activity dot this. Next parameter will be our message. You clicked submit. And then we need to define how long we want it to show for. And there's a nice little quick way of doing this. It's called toast.length, let's say short. And then once we've created it, we want to show it. So we're going to click show. Okay, now let's hit run again and see if it does it differently. Okay, now let's say, hey, click submit. There we've got our hey, but there at the bottom was our message. Not sure if you saw that, so I'm going to go out of this. Let's click submit again. Hey, and that little message at the bottom. You click submit. So that's all we're doing for today, guys. I hope you learned something new about how to find the elements from the layout to actually do something and created your first functional app. Thanks very much for watching. As always, if you've got any questions, you can leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to answer you. Otherwise, like and subscribe. Obviously helps me create more content, and I'll be back with more videos soon. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good one.